Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Down Syndrome Center podcast. As always, I am your host, Dr. Kishore Velody, and we are in the middle of a series that we're doing here, looking at what all of the national organizations do in this space all across the country. And there's some wonderful work that's being done. I know that so many of you listening likely have local organizations that you work with, parent groups that you work with, and you may wonder, well, what is it that the national organizations are doing that help me in my small town where I'm in? And that's what we're hoping to answer through this podcast series that we're doing right now. So today we are really blessed to be joined by Candy Pickard from the National Down Syndrome Society, and she is here to tell us more about NDSS. But before we do that, Candy, do you mind just fill us in a little bit about who you are, kind of the basics of what you do and why you love working with our population?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to join the podcast. I'm as folks say, right, a long time listener, first time caller. So I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you for having me. I got involved in the Down syndrome community after the birth of my son, Mason. Mason just celebrated his 10th birthday, which is wild to believe. And so I'm actually was living in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time. At the birth of Mason, I got involved in our local group, which many folks do, and had the opportunity to serve on their board as a vice chair. And we had a visit from NDSS coming to talk about the ABLE Act and how we could learn more and implement that within our community. And a connection was made. And long story short, 7 years later, here I am. Never in a million years did I think that I would have the opportunity to lead NDSS in the role that I am now, but I am beyond honored to do that and to represent so many in our community.
That's great. And yeah, we got the chance to meet in person a couple of months ago at another convention. And it was so cool to be able to see just how all the organizations nationally are working together in such a brand new and fresh way. And it's wonderful, wonderful for us to see all of that. So just give our listeners, if you don't mind, just a little bit of a background, like what is NDSS? Like, where did it come from? Like history type of things.
Yep, absolutely. So NDSS was founded in 1978 by Bart and Betsy Goodwin. They had a daughter, Carson, that was born with Down syndrome, and they got involved within the Down syndrome community, but we're still looking for resources. And so Betsy kind of took this under her wing to really just get involved and to look at how she could create resources for other parents that were kind of experiencing similar situations to hers. And so I think that Betsy never thought that NDSS would grow into what we've grown into over the past 43 years. But she got with a close friend of hers, Arn Moulton, and officially we gained nonprofit status in 1979. And the Goodwins still play a tremendous role within NDSS, and we're really thankful for them to do this. But NDSS really kind of breaks up into three different areas, just to kind of simplify it. Policy and advocacy is one of them. Policy and advocacy is the backbone of our organization. And then we go into programming and resources. And so as we talked about with Betsy starting this, she wanted to create these resources that were accessible to everybody and that they were at no charge for folks to get this information. So that way, depending on if they were a new parent going through all of these phases that so many of us have done, or they were somebody who has, somebody who now we're doing aging, resources for our aging population, which is fantastic. And so it's exciting to kind of continue that path of our resources. And then we have different programming that falls into employment, education. We're doing a lot within the aging and health and wellness space right now. And then obviously we do the events and we do all of the fun stuff that goes with it as well. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what we do a little bit, but really our focus is listening to what the community needs and really being kind of in the depths of our community, because the work that we do on a national level is fed by what folks are experiencing on a local level.
And I guess that's kind of where I was wondering, what I'm asking from all of the groups that we have on during this mini series that we're doing on the podcast is, if you're in a community setting, far, far away from what you would think maybe like the hustle and bustle of DC and the policy advocacy and all that stuff that's going on there, what is it that NDSS is doing for that small community and that family in particular? How could they understand what the grand scale is of what NDSS does?
Yeah, I think it comes down to simply when we look at Just say, for instance, employment. Right now, we are working on a transition toolkit within NDSS because we realize that that transition from education into employment looks different for everybody. And so these are tools and guidelines, more or less, that a local family or a local group could take and then implement within their local community. So we really, and what's really great, and I just use that as an example, is we pull local affiliate leaders into these discussions and into these tools so that we are representing, really what they're going through and getting their feedback, along with people with Down syndrome. I mean, we have about, I think it's right around 25% of our staff has Down syndrome, and they're involved in everything that we do when it comes from our strategic planning to implementation to events. Like, they're involved in all of that access. And so, for instance, Charlotte Woodward, who's on our team, just graduated from George Mason with her bachelor's degree in sociology and some incredible minor. Wow. Graduating with all A's, I have to say, which is amazing and fantastic. But that's not the path that looks like for everybody with Down syndrome. And so for us, we want to make sure that we're representing in our programming, the capacity and the great skills that every person with Down syndrome has.
I think that's something that's so important. And I love the fact that NDSS puts emphasis on that too, is having that representation from self-advocates. It helps all of us to remember who it is that we're serving, and also helps us to learn from their perspective, what is it that they need? So I love that. I love that.
Absolutely.
So obviously there are several events that NDSS does, as well as you've been kind of alluding to even during this podcast, that would also impact local communities as well. Could you share with us a little bit about some of the major events that people might see an NDSS logo on, perhaps, or things that are on the boots on the ground, things that you're doing as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we do, NDSS kind of leads and runs the National Buddy Walk program. So we have, I think, more than 150 buddy walks across the country, and we work really closely with affiliate leaders and organizing them and making sure that gets out there. Right now, we are kind of in the final steps of our Times Square video, which is always a very popular feature for our community too. We typically get close to 3,000 photo submissions, but we're lucky to have a space donated in Times Square to highlight over 500 individuals with Down syndrome before we kick off our New York City Buddy Walk that's in Central Park. And really proud of the Buddy Walk. It's the largest, awareness event for Down syndrome. Kind of leading into our advocacy and policy world, we are, thank goodness, coming back to do an in-person Hill Day. It's something we've done for many years and had to have it a little bit paused, as we all have on different events and stuff, but we will be back in person to do a Hill Day in April, which is a really great opportunity, I think, for families to understand their role in advocacy and policy on a federal level and on a state level. And just real quickly, I'll never forget attending my first Buddy Walk we called it a Buddy Walk on Washington at the time, but our first Buddy Walk on Washington. And I really thought that it was a Buddy Walk. That's all that I had experienced. And so when I got this, email telling me to, dress up and look professional when I'm meeting with my congressional members, I was like, whoa, this is too much for me. Right. But I left those meetings and having those opportunities to share with our leaders, that are making decisions about our community, to share our story and what's important for my family when it comes to Mason's needs. And I realized, like, this is for everybody, right? And I think what I learned before I was a staff member at NDSS on our Hill Day was that I could take that back home and I can implement that in my local community. And I think that that's something that I think collectively across the Down syndrome, major national organizations, we all want to empower our families to advocate, within their local communities, because there's nothing more powerful. So we encourage folks to come to the Hill Day in April of next year. And then we do a lot of events around World Down Syndrome Day. Obviously, that's a really, popular and great way to celebrate our events. And then we do host a gala in New York and a golf outing and all the good stuff. But those are kind of some of the more popular, events that we host that help fund our programming and our work.
That's awesome. And I will definitely put a link to the website in our show notes so that people can see the exact dates and how they can perhaps even be there in person in some of these events as you guys go through them during the year. I guess one question I want to see, as somebody who is living in their community, hearing this podcast, thinking, wow, what an awesome amount of things that NDS is doing, and I'd like to get involved with that or somehow partner with that mission. What would be some ways that you would suggest that they could do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, sign up for our newsletters. You can go to ndss.org and it really shares all the different opportunities that we look for volunteers or we look for people to help support us in different situations. We have a few different ambassador kind of groups as well. Are probably our most well received as our Down syndrome ambassador. And that really allows folks to understand from an advocacy and policy perspective, what's going on. So they can understand that if they live in Mississippi and there's some movement on a bill that's going to impact their community, how they can get involved and how they can take action with that. And so, again, going back to our website, there's a lot of information on the website that tells more about that program. If, advocacy and policy isn't your thing, but you love to run and you love to be involved in, athletics, we do have an athlete ambassador program, which is really exciting and fun too. But it really is a great way for folks who, may not want to be on the Hill or may not want to be in that more public manner to represent the Down syndrome community in a really unique way by doing what they love. And then we have different action alerts and different things for folks to just get involved in. But we're always looking for volunteers, when we do our events and when we're in the community, meeting with folks to understand, right, where their role is and how they can support us is always fantastic.
That's so great. I mean, it's amazing, right? We tell you, okay, let's come on this podcast and we'll talk about what your organization does. And then as you sit down, I'm sure, and you think about it, it's just, we haven't probably even skimmed the surface on so many of the things that the organization is able to do. And I just think that's awesome. I think as a family member of somebody with Down syndrome and thinking about how NDSS is there and all of the other nationals are there, everyone is there advocating so that we're not repeating our past 30, 50, 70 years ago. The way people with Down syndrome are treated is very, very different now. And I think through the work that the organization is doing, you're anticipating it'll be even better and better as time goes by. That's really exciting. Anything else that you wanted to touch on during this podcast, or a closing comment that you would make to, let's say, a family who's learning about the NDSS for the first time? This podcast goes out all over the place. And so for some people, especially if they don't live here in the US, this might be the first time they've ever even heard of the National Down Syndrome Society in terms of specifically what you do. Is there anything you would want to share with those folks?
I think we encourage everybody to reach out. Somebody will pick up the phone if you're calling us, or somebody will answer that email directly from our team. We want to hear from you. And I think that's really the exciting thing. I think if you're just getting this diagnosis or you're just having the birth, first and foremost, congratulations. Welcome to this, as you know, this spectacular community that you never knew you wanted or needed in your life. And you've gained friends for life, right? And a family that supports you. And I think too, the great part about, I think what, NDSS is that we are so collaborative. And so I think that when we look at where our role, and you mentioned the other role, there's a role for all of our national groups here. And the great part is that we are collaborating on so many collective efforts that are going to benefit our community even more. And so I say kind of stay tuned for that, because I think there's a lot of conversations happening with all of us on how do we, make our voice louder and bigger and more impactful for our community. And NDSS is just a small part of that group. And so it's great to be part of that group as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful to see these pictures that come out now with everybody kind of together in a room and working together for the betterment of everybody with Down syndrome that we're all serving in the end. And so I love that. I love that. Well, to our listeners, I hope that you learned as much as I did today about this wonderful organization. And I hope that you've also been inspired to figure out ways that you can put some of these actions that we've talked about today into your community as well, whether it be advocacy and working together, bringing buddy walks into your area. All of those things are all available through the hard work of the NDSS as well. So if you have any questions or anything that you would like us to address on this podcast of any sort, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Down Syndrome Center at chp.edu. And we'd be glad to find speakers that would be able to answer those questions. If you would like to partner with us in our mission, including this podcast, please go to www.givetochildrens.org/Down Syndrome Center, and we would be honored to have you partner with us. But until next time, bye-bye.